Netflix dropped a bunch of releases this weekend, and I've been on a binge session trying to catch them all, kind of like Pokemon. Okay, don't unsubscribe, please. I Am All Girls is a crime drama that focuses on a pretty terrible crime, and it's based on true events. But should you be watching it? A special crimes investigator forms an unlikely bond with a serial killer to bring down a global child sex trafficking syndicate. If you can't tell, the content for this story is heavy and depressing. I mean, it's dark, very depressing as well. There's a high level of trauma that surrounds this story, so right off the bat, I know that this isn't going to be something that a lot of people are going to want to watch. The story begins with interview footage of a man who is an admitted child trafficker. He's caught for the kidnapping of 6 young girls. And we watch the action play out as he describes what he did, and it sets up the tone for the movie. Now, through the movie, more of this story is played out to give us more detail on the victims, but it's really only reinforcing what we already know. We have 2 storylines going on, and then they converge and add a new angle to the story. One is a detective named Jody who is working to find child traffickers and bring them to justice. Through small moments, we find out that she's been working in this area, either inside or out of law enforcement, for a really long time. And this is just her personal mission, and she is not going to stop until she succeeds. The second storyline is that of a serial killer who is killing men and carving letters into their chests. The setup for this is a little thrilling, and it has a really good angle to it. And once we know who the victims of the serial killer are, the case gets really interesting. Jody is pulled from one case to investigate the new killings, but because Jody didn't want to be pulled from the other case, this new murder investigation is more of a nuisance to her, so she's not wholeheartedly investigating it. But the story then adds in some twists, and I think they're pretty obvious, but they do work for the overall story. The justice angle to this is something probably a lot of people can get behind, at least in theory. I mean, we have bad guys who did terrible things and are now reaping the consequences. Now, like I said, the atmosphere is extremely dark in tone. The content surrounding child trafficking is tough to watch, and it's stomach-turning too. I mean, the movie doesn't show any of the violence, but we don't need it to. The act of watching just a young girl in a bedroom with a man walking in and then closing the door behind him, that's more than enough we need to see. The central crime of the movie, which is the kidnapping of 6 young girls by a suspected child trafficker, is actually based on a real-life case in South Africa, and that fact alone is horridly depressing. Now, as interesting as both of the cases are, the story works against itself to either ruin suspense or make parts of it less impactful. Within the first 30 minutes, we're pretty sure we know who that serial killer is, and then by the 40-minute mark, it's confirmed. That means we still have a little more than an hour to go in the movie, and much of the mystery has been completely removed. This then becomes a half-hearted chase movie, but it loses a lot of interest because the tension of not knowing who the killer was driving a lot of that excitement and mystery. And a lot of the story then becomes something bland and unoriginal. As the story goes along, Jody, who is on a righteous crusade, she tends to make things worse because of her decisions and her actions. And this becomes frustrating to watch, even though I can get behind her motivations. There are several small insertions or angles to the story that just felt thrown in. They're meant to add tension or suspense, but because they come out of the blue and then are instantly forgotten when the scene ends, they're just adding time without any consequence. So while I enjoyed the chase aspect of this to a degree, the reveal of the mystery so early on in the story reduced all of the tension for the last 2/3 of the film. I think the story had a really good opportunity to tell a compelling tale surrounding the real-life tragedy of those child abductions and the trafficking, but it gets lost in the weeds of Jody's pursuit. I am glad, though, that it does draw attention to the horror of trafficking. I mean, I only wish it would have done a better job at it. There's no nudity, a lot of allusions to sex and sexual abuse, a lot of profanity, and a bunch of bloody violence. I give I Am All Girls 2.5 out of 5 couches. So what are you watching right now? Anything worthwhile? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.